Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're talking to you about my new favorite cordless compound miter saw. This one right here. Or is it? But not really. Actually, that's exactly what we're going to be talking to you about today. We're going to be going over this XGT Brushless 8¼ AWS capable cordless dual bevel compound miter saw from Makita. It is a tool that has been long awaited for, at least for us personally, mainly because we really wanted to get our hands on this saw, and we finally have one. We've actually had it for a couple weeks, actually more than a couple months, and worked on it with it for over several projects. So we've got our own thoughts and stuff about it. So we're going to go over this tool top to bottom, give you our thoughts, and possibly either recommend it or not recommend it. So you do not want to miss this. Stick with us. All right, you guys, so I'm going to go out and say this right now. This is not a review video where you're going to be saying, oh, can this miter get as tight as possible without a sliver of light coming through and all that stuff. This is not that. We're going to be going over general use of this miter saw. So I'm just throwing that disclaimer up there if you want to go look at how accuracy and close and stuff like that is. We will talk about it, but we're not going to go over like specs and like super like details of like, you know, how tight those miters can get. So with that being said, let's get into it. This right here is the Makita GSL02 in the States. If you're in Europe, the model number is something like LS002 or something like that. But whether you buy it as a kit or you buy it as a tool only, for in the US, the model number is GSL02. If you do buy it as a kit, it ends with a Z. If you buy it, or if you buy it as a tool only, it ends with a Z. If you buy it as a kit, it ends with like an M1 or an M2, depending on what battery configuration stuff that you buy it with. So with that being said, let me also say this is a tool that we did purchase with our own monies. Nobody sent this to us. It's not sponsored. Nobody loaned it to us, any of that. We've actually purchased this actually a couple months ago. And then we actually have it now, and we've had it for quite a few weeks. So take everything we're gonna say with our like legitimately our own opinions. We don't have any like, you know, affiliates or anything related to this. So with that being said, let me go out and say we've waited for this miter saw for quite a long time, mainly because it is a forward rail miter saw. We really love that. It is on the Makita XGT platform, right? So for us, technically right now, the saw that we kind of use, if possible, you know, our carrier, you know, light duty miter saw is mainly the Milwaukee M18 7¼ miter saw with a sliding, right? I think a lot of people love that saw, and we actually love that saw too. There's nothing wrong with the saw, right? But we mostly run Makita tools, and mainly due to that, we're actually waiting for this. Also, because the forward rail design, we're actually more used to it by now, mainly because of the Makita 10-inch miter saw that we use, the 18 by 2 36-volt one. But anyways, we've gone too far into it, so before we get too far into it, let's go look at the marketing hype, and then we'll bring you in closer and take a better look at it. All right, so this right here is the Makita 40-volt max XGT Brushless 8.5-inch dual bevel sliding compound miter saw. It has a Makita built brushless motor that delivers up to 4,800 RPM for fast cutting performance. It has a large capacity of 2¾ inch by 12¼ inch. Cutting capacity at 90 degrees. I'm not sure if I said 2¾ but it's 2¾ the accuracy has an LED light shadow that casts the saw blade onto the material for an exact cutting line. It is AWS capable. That is not Amazon Web Services. That's actually automatic wireless start between the tool and the dust extractor, okay? As a traditional Makita stuff, it's got the outpower, outlast, outsmart technology. This particular miter saw will miter up to 60 degrees left and right, and it will bevel up to 48 degrees left and right. The LED shadow we've already talked about, but the dust reduction system on here, they kind of have set up with a dual dust collection port. It also has a blade case design that's supposed to help with that. It has a forward rail design, obviously, to maximize working space. It has AWS capable with Bluetooth technology, but it does not include the chip. You do have to purchase that chip independently. It has extension wings that extend out for a longer cutting material or cutting space. It has a bevel lock. It has electronic brake for maximum productivity. It has a soft start, which suppresses startup reaction and smooth and soft startups. For gear life, you know, it's got all the traditional XGT stuff. And as a general Makita tool, it is backed by their 3-year limited lifetime warranty. So obviously this part right here is the left-hand part of the tool. Let's go over some of the stuff, and some of the stuff we'll go over real quick, mainly because a lot of the stuff is going going to be pretty similar to the 18x2 LXT model. So nothing here is like super world changing, but we will go ahead and talk about some of the stuff. All right, so a lot of stuff is going to go by quick, so stay with me here. All right, so like the 18x2 one, it does have a sliding forward rail system, and it does slide forward like this. Right here is exactly where you would do the locking mechanism if you wanted to stop it from locking out. At first, I thought it had a lot of play here. It's same with the 18x2 one. It's got a lot of play right there too, but I do believe they've done this for a reason, and one of those reasons is because a lot of people who've used the forward rail drop saws will understand this, is that actually even the sliding rail ones, you'll probably see this too, but when you do a lot of cuts, a lot of dust will collect here, okay? And a lot of people know when a lot of dust collects right where that sliding mechanism meets, sometimes you won't get that last millimeter or hair cut that just keeps the workpiece connected, right? So on this one, if you don't have that play there because a lot of dust is collected there, you won't be able to lock it in pretty smoothly until you clear the dust out, right? And I do believe that's kind of why they put it there, so that you don't get super annoyed every time you want to lock it back, right? That allows you to put it back there and lock it even with some of the dust still there, okay? So I do think that's a reason they did that. Anyways, with the rail mechanism here, it does slide really smooth and it's really nice. It even has a really like smooth sound feeling thing they got going on here. So one of the first things you know when you use this is like, wow, this actually feels really smooth. While we have it forward out here, let's go ahead and talk about some of the stuff here, all right? So this right here is a trenching mechanism. If you don't know what that is, it's pretty much like a poor man's dado. Allows you to repeat, make repeatable like same depth cuts. So you can kind of do like a poor man's dado. So that's there. It's pretty straightforward. You slide it out, set the adjustment, make the cuts, and you can slide it back in. Nothing world changing, same thing on the LXT model, right? So right here is where the Allen key is stored. The Allen key is used to change the blade, and you can change the blade right here. I'm not gonna go ahead and change the blade, but I will go ahead and say we've already burned through the previous blade that came with the saw, and the blade that came with the saw is a max efficiency 45 tooth, 8.5 inch blade. And that blade is really, really nice. We really love that blade. I actually have another one on order, but all the places I was trying to get them from just did not have it. So we did go with this Milwaukee 40 tooth 8.5 inch blade. And there's nothing wrong with it. It works really fine. It's just for some reason I just feel, and it's probably a psychological thing, that max efficiency 45 tooth blade just cuts faster and smoother, but you know, it's just probably a psychological thing. Anyways, with the blade change mechanism on this one, they've made a small improvement over the LXT model, meaning on the LXT model, you would unscrew this here and then you would literally hold it back with one hand unless you got like some kind of clamp, and you would put some kind of clamp there to hold this thing up so you can do the blade change. On this model, they've made it so that you can just slide this back and it will hold itself up, and that way you can change the blade mechanism pretty simple and easily without too much hassle. So that is an improvement that they've made right there, all right? So let's talk about this stuff right here. All this stuff here, they've pretty much included, this hold down clamp mechanism. It's nothing special, but it does have this sliding mechanism here, and you can kind of put this here, and you can use it on the left side or on the right side, all right? The other thing with this fence is, as you know right here, this fence is not very tall. So if you want to do like really big crown things like against the fence, it's going to be a little bit difficult because the fence is not very tall, like we mentioned, but the fence is removable, and you will need to remove it if you are going to make a lot of bevel cuts, right? So in order to remove it, you just loosen the wing nuts that are back there, and you can just pull it right up, and it comes off pretty easily, just like that. On this saw, they have included, these stops that actually come out a little bit that extend your work surface, like so. On both sides. It has a big improvement over the 18x2 LXT model, mainly because on the 18x2 LXT model, they didn't have that, right? The thing they had there was just two black bars, like one on each side, that left it there, and you're supposed to use it to hold your workpiece up. And it's kind of like an illusion because it would be a really black piece, but like 1/3 of it was behind the fence, so you couldn't even use the full length of it, right? So it is really nice that they've made this here, and it slides out kind of embedded in here, and the saw stays light, right? So that is a really nice improvement that they've made on this saw, and we really do like that, all right? The other things they have going in on here is this right here, you can see, is obviously, the clearance table, if you want to call it that. I'm not a big fan of this clearance table, mainly because it's a pretty wide gap, but it does kind of need to be there, mainly because when you are doing 45-degree miters and stuff, it does kind of come in this way. So I did, check that out, but it does serve its purpose, right? So another thing I do not like about this saw, and I will go ahead and point this out, is that there is a little gap right here that leads to behind this metal plate. And a lot of times, very small slivers of your material that you are cutting will just get stuck up in there, right? And it's not like it gets sucked out through the vacuum. It's just stuck back in there. And the only way to get it out is you just put, oh, there's even one in there right now. You just have to get your finger and push it back out there if you want to deal with it. But, you know, I just leave it there because, you know, it doesn't annoy me that much. But it is annoying that, you know, the only way to get it out is like this. You have to pull it back out in the same direction that it went in, all right? So now we have you up here closer. Let's go talk about this miter adjustment gauge. So on this gauge right here, as you can see here, it's a pretty thick piece of metal. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it is some type of like stainless or other metal material, mainly because on the LXT model, and I'm just always going to refer back to that mainly because I've used that one a lot and I still have that saw and still use it a lot, is that this piece right here is aluminum. And most people who know metals are going to say aluminum is a soft metal. So a lot of people who were not very careful with their saws would wear these detents out, mainly because, you know, you would just go like this quickly. As you're working fast, you know, sometimes people are working fast and you just go like this and it'll just stop there, right? Which will actually wear out these detents and it'll give it a lot of play. So a lot of people don't like that, have had problems with that. But for me, myself, on my 18 volt X2 saw, I'm aware of that problem. So a lot of times I'll just go slow and just work a little bit, you know, smoothly, not abusing the thing, and there's no problem. But on this one, they've learned from that and they've kind of made this a pretty similar thickness metal, but it's definitely a harder metal than the aluminum. So I'm not as too worried about that. But on the other side, you know, I'm going to be careful with the 2.8. So it's not even a problem, all right? So now let's talk about the miter detents, right? So it's got detents built into 0, 15, 22.5, and 31.6, 45, and obviously the 60, okay? And it will go both directions. The same detents are built into the exact opposite direction, so you will be able to get that. This saw is able to go to 60 degrees in both directions. Not all saws will do that, but this saw will do that. So that is a really nice feature that they have going on there. All right, I will go ahead and tell you my saw was right close to like 0.3 to 0.5 degrees off when it came. So we did have to make a small adjustment, and you're gonna say, yeah, that's not a big deal, right? But if you're cutting like far out a big piece of material over a couple inches, you know, it's gonna eventually make its way, you know, with that much distance, you're gonna be able to tell a small like gap, right? So that is something to be aware of. It wasn't absolutely perfect out of the box, but other than that, it was generally really good, all right? So this right here is where the forward bevel controls, actually where all the controls are. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you this foot right here. So there's a foot right here that you do have to put out. I'm not gonna put it back out, mainly because I want to show you the problem. But the reason this foot exists out is you need to turn it to make it flat with the work surface. When you do have the saw all the way out to the end, as you're cutting down and putting down pressure on it, it's going to have a tendency to lean forward, mainly because the weight of the saw is now at this point, right? And even with the big battery right here, the weight of the saw is going to be tipping forward. So this foot, if you are going to be pulling it all the way out, you do want to make sure it's down so that way you don't get this tipping action. That's what that foot is there for. Otherwise, to move the miter angle, you press down on this a little bit and you can go to the detent and it will automatically lock. If you wanted to move freely, you just press it down all the way and you can move freely without a problem, okay? So if you wanted to put it at, let's just say here, which doesn't have a positive detent, right? And then you want to lock it there, all you do is you just spin this knob right here and it tightens it down. See, now it won't go anywhere. So that's a really nice feature they got going on there. I'll put it back to 0, tighten this down, right? It's not going anywhere. So the forward controls also include the bevel adjustment. So let me back you out here. So the bevel adjustment is made here with this larger knob right here. The way you do that is you just turn lefty for loosey, and it will allow you to bevel all the way to 45 degrees right now, okay? And it will, or it doesn't have any positive stops or detents that go to like 22.5 or anything like that. It just goes 0 to 45. There is a lever on the back that you can switch, right? Pull up, and it will allow you to go to 48 degrees. You probably can't tell from this angle, but it will allow you to get to 48 degrees by pulling that lever. And if you pull it back up, there was a small click. I'm not sure if you heard that, but now it'll lock back into place and allow you to only go back to 45, right? So if you wanted to hit, let's just say 22.5 or whatever angle this is right here, you just turn this knob and it will lock that bevel angle in, and then you can now cut that piece, right? I will go ahead and tell you right now, you cannot get to 45 degrees without removing the fence. You need to remove the fence in order to get that 45-degree bevel on here. So just make sure you know that, okay? And this is a dual bevel saw. So let me move you in closer here. You will not be able to bevel this to the right side unless you pull this lever here. This lever here you pull forward, and now you can bevel the saw to the right side, all right? So as you see right here, the bevel is now stuck at 45. In order to get that other 3 degrees, you just hit this lever down here, and it will allow you to go past 45 to 48. And as you pull the saw back up, it will lock back into place and allow you to only go back to 45. So check it out. Right? Now you're back at 45, okay? So that's really how that works. And then once you come past 0 this way, this lever will pop back in and it'll allow you to 0 out at the top. Watch this. All right? So now if I want to go back to the right, it's back at 0. All right, so this right here is obviously the handle, and this is a nice handle. It's a forward-facing handle, which is a little bit different than a D handle in traditional miter saws. I do prefer this handle, and that's just a personal preference. The other thing to point out on here is that it has a little hole right here. And that's where you would put like a lock or something through there in case you didn't want, you know, kids or somebody else to use this miter saw or something like that, or just to prevent people from using it. This right here, vacuum looking button, is a button that would activate the AWS vacuum that you had connected to this, just in case you wanted to click it and then, you know, use the vacuum to clean up stuff, okay? So at AWS, the vacuum will kick on when you engage the saw, and it will turn off a few seconds after you know, turn off the power to the saw. But if you wanted to use the vacuum, you know, you can't do that without turning it on. So they put a little button here which will activate the vacuum, and then you could take the hose and clean up and put it back or whatnot. I don't have one, but maybe one day we'll get one, but who knows, all right? The other thing here is Makita, in their infinite wisdom, said, let's make the blade shadow line thing a button instead of automatically engaging it, right? So let's go ahead and show you how that works. Let me go ahead and unlock this. So in order to engage the shadow line, you have to press the button. Let's just put a little piece there so you can see it. Even if I were try to cut it down and bring it close, right, nothing happens. There's no light, right? Even if you engage the blade, no light. Only way the light comes on is you press it, and now there is a light for the blade shadow line. And then it will automatically turn off after a while. So if you leave it on and walk off, by the time you get back, it'll probably be off. But it's weird that they put a button for that, right? So I kind of have a love and hate relationship with this, you know, shadow light system. Actually, just shadow light systems and lasers in general. Mainly because, as you can see right now, with the saw blade up, the shadow line is not very clear. You can kind of make it out between the blade guard that's here, right? But it's not very clear. And if you're going to get it clear, you got to bring the blade all the way down. If you're going to do that, I'm already looking at where the line is and where the blade is, so, you know, I'm not going to rely on that too much. But you know, it is weird that it's not like perfect by that mean, or by any means, right? The other love and hate relationship between this and just lasers in general is that the blade shadow light system works great inside. When you go outside, you can't really see it. Even if you're working under a tent, sometimes it's hard to make out. Lasers are great outside and inside, but sometimes you have to worry about calibration and stuff like that. So most normal people that I know, and myself included, will also just won't even use this as much and just put the blade exactly where we think we're going to make the cut and then make the cut. So it's nice that they've, you know, upgraded in a way. I'm just saying upgraded because a lot of people are saying, oh, everybody needs to use shadow lines. You know, personally for me, I really don't care, but it is nice that, you know, they've moved on from the laser system, right? So there is that. All right, so now let's talk about this side of the tool. So this right here is obviously where you would engage the chop mechanism in case you wanted to do that. If you keep it locked back here and you unlock this, you know, you can just use that as a standard chop saw. I rarely ever do that, almost always using it as a sliding miter saw. If you want to stop it from going down, you could just lock it in this position too also, right? But for now, we're just gonna lock it this way, and that works pretty well. So the main reason we're here is to show you this dust collection mechanism, all right? So on the 18-volt X2 model, you know, they had a little plastic piece that would just hold up in here, and you would just friction fit it. A lot of people found that really annoying because, you know, sometimes it broke off or sometimes it was friction fitted, so it would fall off, right? This one, they've actually made it a positive clip system, so you would clip it in order to move it, you just press this down and it falls off, right? There's still dust in here before. And similar with the previous 18 X2 design, you know, they got the dual dust collection port here, one one here and one here. And I think in design or thought process, it seems like a great idea. It just doesn't work as well as you want it to, right? So dust goes in here and it splits off, you know, bringing air in from close to the blade and right here at the base. But for me, what I've always found out is even with a corded dust extractor, dust will still get stuck right here, even if you are cutting slowly. You're not just like ripping or just like just going through material really fast. You're just cutting slowly, making your miter slowly and stuff like that. It will still get stuck right there. And the other thing to note here is that if you move the saw really fast in terms of like a sliding cut really fast like this, every once in a while, I found out that you see this part that moves right here, it will just fall out, okay? So the way you disengage this is that you turn this down, right? And then you can pull this out, right? So if you move the saw quickly enough with just enough material and, you know, all the stars align and stuff like that, the thing turns back enough where it just falls out. It's happened like maybe twice, I want to say, over the last couple weeks that we've used it. So every once in a while it gets annoying, but you know, it's not a huge deal by any means. Also, as we just saw, and I didn't do this on purpose, there is still a lot of dust in there. It's a pretty small hole. It's a lot of fine dust, right? But there is still dust in there that gets stuck in there, even if you are using a corded dust extractor with a lot of CFM going through. So, you know, that is something that they probably could improve there, okay? The other thing you can see right here is there's a little sticker here that tells you, you know, move this lever if you want to get past from 45 to 48. We'll go back around and show you the lever on the other side, all right? So if you're looking at it from the back, you know, they've gone a pretty good design on trying to keep it sturdy and lightweight with this bracing and cross bracing they have going in on there. This right here is where the lever is, so you want to press this lever this way once you're like beveling, and it will get you to 48, and it will automatically pop back as you just saw, locking you back to 45 degrees. It's got this back footer here to help prevent it from tipping backwards, just in case, you know, that was a thing. But other than that, not too much stuff going on there. All right, you guys, so this is probably where we would normally throw in the tool in action, show some cutting footage and stuff like that. But in order to keep the video condensed as much as possible, we're just gonna put most of that towards the end credit scene. So go towards the end and all the cutting footage and stuff will be there, all right? Just make sure you note that we are still using this blade in that cutting scene, and this blade has been on here for a little weeks. We've gone through, I think it was like 3 bedrooms and 1 laundry room worth of like laminate flooring and baseboarding, and also some pressure treated framing lumber. So, you know, it's not necessarily the best, and plus it's not necessarily the best to start with anyway. So just keep that in mind when you look at it. But otherwise, moving forward, let's go ahead and close this video and talk about some of the pros and cons and our final thoughts, all right? So with that being said, talk about some of the stuff that we like. It's obviously a forward rail design with the front-facing handle on Makita's cordless XGT 40V max platform, okay? There's a lot to be said there. Also, the forward rail design is definitely space-saving. If you use forward rails design saws before, that's obviously pretty good. The other thing to note about it is the weight and its footprint and size, right? So if you put it up in its travel position where you kind of turn it head down, locked and everything, it's a fairly small footprint and it's easy to carry, okay? It's right around like 35.6 pounds. I'm not the biggest guy, but it's very easy to carry. Way easier than their 18 by 2 36 volt saw, which has a huge footprint, okay? The other thing I like about it is they have a blade shadow light system, if you want to call that a plus. And then on top of that, they have now these guide wings, right? The wings that come out that increase the cutting surface, okay? The other thing you could really like about it is the front. All the adjustments are on the front. That's a huge plus, mainly because you don't have to reach around back or behind the saw for really anything unless you need to cut past 48 degrees. So that's a huge plus, okay? Some are going to say this is a con or a plus or minus, but it's got a dual port dust collection design that kind of looks pretty cool, I want to say. It also has AWS capability functionality, and it has a button to trigger AWS if you wanted to use the vacuum to do other stuff, okay? And it is generally a pretty stable and well-built tool, as you would expect from Makita. And I think that's pretty much all the pros, right? So let's talk about the cons. The cons are going to say, look at this footprint size. And yes, I'm going to be arguing because you're going to be trading off footprint size and then versus like weight, ratio, and all that stuff. But the point is that the part where it comes out this much, where you can stretch the drop saw out, comes out this far. When it comes out this far, the area here, right here at the base, is really small. So sometimes some of the material will be flapping around and won't be too sturdy. Yes, you can fix that by having it on a miter saw station or a miter saw tool stand, and that's not a problem. But if you're just using an area like this, then it becomes, you know, a little bit like that, okay? So the other thing not to like about it is the dust collection. So it's got the dual port design, but I'm going to show you in the video. Just go take a look at it. It just doesn't work very well. For some reason, it seems like you would think it would work better, but it just doesn't. So there is that. And the other thing not to like about it is, and I'm going to complain about this no matter whatever miter saw that we get, is that you always have to like deal with these fences, right? When you want to cut bevels, right? It would be nice if somehow there was some solution somebody invented where you didn't have to do that, okay? And the other thing to point out while we're talking about the fences is that these fences are not very tall, okay? And that I think is by design mainly because of the other thing I'm about to talk about here. But you can barely put a 2x4 here, and it's pretty much about the tallness of a 2x4 or 3.5, I should say 2x4, right? On the fence, right? So it's not very high. If you want to cut really high crown molding standing up, you're not going to be able to do that with the saw. Obviously, the cut capacity is going to factor in there. Talking about the cut capacity, let's talk about that. On most other miter saws or drop saws, especially on the X2 one, this part right here is a little bit raised up or cut out, so you can cut taller material. On this saw, they decided to keep it completely flat here, which kind of limits its cutting capacity standing up, okay? Talking about the 2x4 here, if you try to cut the 2x4 here, it'll leave just a little bit of a hair at the end where you can't really fully make that cut. At least for me, or the 2x4s that I had, I just couldn't fully make the cut. So that's also something to talk about. You kind of have to lay that one down, okay? So let's talk about the other thing, which has two sides, right? First, the first part of that is the blade size. The blade size is 8.5, and as most people know, 8.5 is not a super common blade size. Yes, you could call it a commodity, but it's not super common, right? The most common blade sizes right now are going to be like 6.5, 7.25, 10, and 12s, right? Yes, there are saws that have like 8.5, 8.25, or stuff like that, but this is 8.5, okay? So if you want to use the standard Makita blade, and I will encourage you to use that blade because that max efficiency or whatever blade that they call that thing is really nice. It cuts really well, really smooth, okay? And it actually cuts really fast. That blade is right around like $60. That blade is not cheap, okay? And with most things that aren't super common, it's going to be a hefty price tag to it. So if you want to get like a Diablo 62 blade or something like that, I believe it was around like $58 or something like that. Milwaukee blades, they have a 60-tooth blade too. I think it was somewhere around like 50s or 40 something. And then this 40-tooth blade is around like 45, 48, somewhere around there. But the point is that that's a lot compared to a 7.25 inch saw, circular blade, which is, you know, it's like $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, even for a decent Diablo or a Spider or something like that, right? So there is that. The price of the blade is probably gonna, you know, hit at you in the long run. The other thing to point out here is that as most Makita tools, this thing runs a premium. This thing right here with the tool only will cost you somewhere around like $750. And if you buy it as a kit, it'll be somewhere closer to like $899 or somewhere around that cost range, depending on what specials and stuff that you get it with. But the point is that it's running a premium, right? You can get other saws, right? You can even get 10-inch saws that are cheaper than that are cordless, right? But the point is that it's running a premium. That's the thing you really want to know about that, okay? So if we didn't talk about all the blade tweak settings and stuff, is all up front, so you know that makes it super easy. But other than that, you know, that's what we really got to say. Besides, if you're on the AWS platform with Makita, then obviously that's a plus. But if you're not, then you know, really don't care. So the other thing that is pretty good is going to be the battery life. So we were able to get through about 3 decently sized, normal sized bedrooms and a laundry room with MDF planking and then baseboards, right? So that was able to get through all of this with the 4-amp-hour battery. So battery life is pretty good. You can put an 8-amp-hour battery on there and obviously get significantly longer, right? You obviously don't want to carry it around with that. And if you have it on here, it's not really a weight problem because, you know, it's stationary. So the battery life is generally pretty good enough to get you by. But other than that, things that they could improve on is one, have the blade shadow lighting automatically engage when you pull the trigger or you push the safety or something like that, instead of having to be a manual push. And then the other thing is obviously the dust collection. Somehow, whatever they need to do, they need to do something about it to make it a little bit better, right? Those are the two things I would definitely encourage them to improve. The blade, the saw, when you have it fully extended, there is a little bit of play, just like an all miter saws, but it's nowhere nearly as bad as some of the other saws that we've seen. So I did want to point that out. So I know, I'm sure you probably really want to look at the cutting footage, so let's go ahead and let you look at that. So otherwise, you know, have a great day. Hope this video helped you guys out. Get back to work, and then we'll see you guys next time.